Tonight we asked, do we have policies in place to address racism in schools? Do principals, school governing bodies and other stakeholders know what to do if there are allegations of racism? And do we even have descriptions of what constitutes racism within the schooling context? Here to help me unpack this, I'm joined by education expert Dr. Mary McCalf, General Secretary of the National Association of School Governing Bodies, Matakanye, FETSA's Executive Committee member Rian van der Berg, as well as Freedom Front Plus National Chairperson Anton Alberts. And of course, we are continuing this conversation that has started for a while now and has been going on in the country. But every time we speak of this, we are saying, well, now it is amplified, and therefore we need to address it and maybe come up with sensitivity programs in schools and the likes, and so on and so forth. But it never does seem to really get to the point of being addressed. Mary McCalf, you can weigh in here from your point of view. 27 years on, young children still confronted with racism in our schools. What does that say about how we have been addressing this particular matter?
Let me say, first of all, that the humiliation of being treated on the basis of a negative view of your race is extremely painful, hurtful, and we have to get past this as a country. However, I think that the process of dealing with very deeply ingrained attitudes of inferiority and superiority of one race over another, of one gender over another, whatever the bias is something that's pervasive in society, and we cannot be expecting that schools on their own are going to be able to combat these negative attitudes. We have to work within society as a whole, recognizing that it is a journey of acknowledging that racism exists, acknowledging that it exists amongst all South Africans, because we've all, in our own formative years, even post-1994, and in the way that society operates, we have a reinforcement of negative attitudes in terms of race. That means we need to start listening to each other, acknowledging that change has to happen, that all of us need to change, and we need to move away from highly emotive, divisive situations as we have at the moment. I believe we need to minimize the blame attitude and maximize talking and hearing and listening in a culture that does not tolerate racism but recognizes that we all have to grow.
Matakanye joining us on the line, General Secretary of the National Association of School Governing Bodies. Do we have, Dr. Matakanye, a defined common national agenda, particularly in our schools, that is able to mobilize society and all members of that school to take part in the implementation of this agenda in dealing with racism in our schools? Because, you know, every time we have this conversation, I know what will come out. It's like, well, this is a reflection of what's happening in society. So there's racism in society. Naturally, it comes to our schools. But is there something within the school system that we agree upon that this is what we are going to implement and embark upon in dealing with racism in the school?
Thank you very much. Good evening, Thabo, and my fellow comrades over there. Thabo, we have a common vision as South Africans. However, there are just few elements within the society that do not share the common vision. And hence, after this number of years, 28, 29, 30, we still have those elements within the society. However, I think these are just few elements who are still believing in the past and still trying to protect what they used to have in the past. And even if, well, time does not allow them to protect those benefits that they used to get in the past. And they really do not realize that 1994 was the breaking area where the past remained in the past, and all the South Africans started moving forward and building one nation. And we are building one nation. And the common goal or the vision is to build one South Africa. And you must understand, Thabo, that I'm talking of those elements that are saying they are superior than any other member of South African nation. So they still believe in that. But I think their time is over. Then we are just about to arrive where we are getting to.
Danton, let's bring you in here. I mean, are you satisfied with the approach that the South African Human Rights Commission is taking in the investigation of this particular matter?
Yes, I think it's good that the Human Rights Commission has come into the process and is trying to find out what is going on. And our position is basically that we need to remember that we're dealing with children here. Doesn't matter from which background the children come from, and we are the adults, and we must make sure that they are safe, that they're placed in an environment where they are safe in school and where there's no predatory acts taken against them of whatever nature it may be, including racism. Children will fight for various reasons, and we find that children in school fight among same races, but also different races. Sometimes the fights of different races are not necessarily racism, but there might be an underlying racism. In this case, at Jan Viljoen, it seems like there's overt racism. Now, those things need to be addressed, and it's quite worrisome for us to see that the Gauteng Education Department has not really done much, except for structural reforms. They have not done much in terms of implementing a policy where the children who go to school together actually get to know each other much better, to understand where each one comes from. There are socioeconomic differences, there are racial differences, and many other types of differences among children, even among children of the same race. There are various differences that can lead to disputes and maybe even escalate into violence. So we need to take a holistic approach in trying to resolve these issues. If we look just at the prevalence of bully acts in school, and bullies might be motivated by many things, including racism as well. So yes, while racism has now been amplified, as you have rightly said, in the Jan Viljoen school scenario, we must really take a holistic look and see how we can create a safe environment where children in school get to know each other, get to an understanding of each other's background. That will take out a lot of the misplaced views that people have about each other. So what the Gauteng department did, the education department, is merely to make sure that schools who aren't full becomes schools that have more than one language being taught. Having more than one language in a school, whether it's a language where most of them are white or black, doesn't matter, but when you have different language groups coming in, you also have a difference. And that also plays into a situation where people might want to use the differences in a certain situation to bully other children. And so there must be a policy in place that helps schools, the teachers, the principal, the SGBs, and the school community at large to help to train the children on how to value each other as fellow pupils, even though you might speak different languages, you might go to class in different languages. And I just want to add that it's very important that we do this, actually, because the new National Education Act is going to allow for schools, for more mixed language schools. And MEC Lesufi has indicated that he wants to see mixed language schools. So you will have 4 different language groups in one school. So you will have English, Afrikaans, Zulu, Xhosa, whatever the case may be, Sotho, And so you bring then children together with different backgrounds. And if you don't have some diversity training in place, then you're going to have conflict. It's just a natural thing that's going to happen. And we must make sure that we work to sort that out so that we protect the school-going children, the learners, and that ensures them that they have a productive school career going forward and become balanced adults in South Africa.
We hear from Festus in a moment when we continue. Rian van der Berg, Executive Committee member with us here. They are, of course, a national representative organization for governing bodies, which informs, organizes and mobilizes and develops its members to achieve and uphold the highest recognized international educational standard. Does that include diversity training? Does that include them being able to identify and investigate such incidents of racism when they are brought to their attention? Focus the question for the night: do we have clear guidelines, policies in place to address the question of racism in schools? Professor Mary Metcalf, Matakanye, Rian van der Berg, as well as Anton Alberts with us tonight. And yeah, Rian, it's as we were talking just now, it's something that has now happened in broad daylight. Kids have experienced this fight, and it is clearly coming out that it was along racial lines. How do you go back from that? How do you come back from that? Do you policy that? How do you address it?
Yeah, I think it's possibly, you can't unring a bell. Old Chinese saying that if it happened, it happened. But it didn't happen in the instance. I think one needs to understand the context of a school. One needs to understand the context of that particular school. It must have been brewing. It must have been latent. And that is where I think the construct of a public school needs to come into play. And I just want to put down a few anchors in that. A public school is a representation from the community and the society. You said earlier, you know, school is just a reflection of society, and we can't divorce ourselves from that. We can't fix in a school what is broken in society. So we need to maybe review how we address these issues. And I want to echo what Mary said, what Mr. Matakanye said. You know, it might be an isolated incident in this school, or even in the broad scope of 23,000 public schools in the country. But still, it is 100% scenario for the kids that experience this one. So it is real, and it needs to be addressed. So public school is a representation of the society, and parents are the majority on the school governing body. So if this is happening in school, where were the parents when we voted in the governing body in 2021, which was election year? Where are the parents representing? I think most schools struggle to achieve a quorum when they have a meeting because parents are not involved in the education of their school. So the governing body has to struggle and ensure that they do the best by the Schools Act, act in the best interest of the school and stand in a position of trust towards the school. And that involves understanding the society, understanding the complexities of what goes on around there. When we do training, diversity, local context, transformation is part of what we say people on the school governing body need to be aware of. The school used to be an Afrikaans single language school maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. It has transformed into a parallel medium school. But sadly, transformation is not an event. Yeah. It is a process. Yeah. So transformation needs to continually happen. And like I mentioned in the break, you cannot reverse engineer the fruit and the tree.
Yes, yes.
We can't policy and make more trees, make more fruit so that the tree becomes good. We have to, and I think that's where we want to echo what Mary Metcalf said. We've got to hear each other. We've got to find each other, understand each other, and then grow together, because that is in the best interest of the school. And at the end of the day, the incidence of this week is very sad because it stopped learning and teaching for probably 1,000 learners, where 20, 30, or 40 kids were actually the culprits. I don't know the exact stats, and the Human Rights Commission will get to the bottom of that, but we're disrupting education for many learners because of an isolated incident, but that incident was alive before the actual explosion took place.
Do you think those divisions exist within the governing body itself? I mean, the MEC's position is that the governing body is not going to investigate this. We'll get the South African Human Rights Commission to come in and investigate this.
I'm very happy that the Human Rights Commission is investigating this, because that then does not put the governing body in a situation where they investigate their own context. But it should not be that the governing body is, divided. Parents, the majority of the members on the governing body are parents, and they should represent the community that elected them, and they should represent all faith. I think the school has close on 45%, call it black learners, 55% white learners. The SGB should look like that, because participation, everyone could have exercised their right to vote. So what we're saying is, take Jan Viljoen out of the picture, we need a governing body that understands what goes on in the context of that community, that is not divided based on any lines other than the common goal of getting together to ensure quality education for all learners in that school and ensuring that it's a safe place. Our Constitution is policy enough to say that we should not discriminate, should not have racism. The Schools Act reiterates it. The Education Policy Act reiterates it. The safety regulations in Gauteng speaks about it. Infrastructure, norms and standards, everything talks about policy, policy, policy. But we need to change our views and manage the school to the better quality education for all learners at that school. And that includes everyone.
Mary, what I hear Rian saying here, of course, is that there probably was a lack of structures and systems in moving the school from a single medium school into a parallel school that would guide how that process would actually happen and what things would need to be put into the system to assist in that transition.
I'm enjoying this conversation, and thank you to the rest of the panel and to you. So firstly, I would say that the process going forward, in my view, should not be about finding blame and finding guilty parties. It has to recognize that this is a learning process, that it has to be a conscious and deliberate learning process, and that everybody is part of finding the solution. We have to recognize that the Human Rights Commission has limited capacity. They're coming into this situation, but all communities need, and all schools need to say, we're in a transformation journey. We need to be deliberate about understanding more deeply the complexities of race and class and ranges of issues. And what are the resources we have within the community that we can pull in? Where are faith communities? Where are community leaders that can help us on this journey of confronting and understanding our own unconscious biases, conscious biases, but it is a commitment to a learning journey. And I hope that in this school, the process is one which brings in all parties into the solution.
And Dr. Matakanya, we are, of course, trying to find a solution that brings all parties into the system, but also we are asking the question of what can be legislated or what sanctions can be meted out here that could even begin to correct this situation. I mean, the Human Rights Commission talking about possibly recommendations that could be given around finding a charge on misconduct, possibly declaring those involved, if they are teachers, unsuitable to teach. Are these the correct instruments? Is the right approach to take?
Thank you very much, Thabo, once again. Look, I think we have to craft a policy that has to deal with this. Because when you look at the situation, these people who are practicing what it appears to be racism activity. Now the question arises is, where do they get this? Because they were not there prior 1994. Even after 1994, they were not. Where do they get this practice of behaving as they behave, then it's perceived as a behavior that has the element of racism? Where do they get it? Because we know prior 1994, we were invited in this country, development was separate and all those things. And we thought by 1994, that will be the path. But it appears to be going on, and I think, as we are saying, there are still few elements within the community, within the society, who are teaching their children what used to happen prior 1994. So therefore, I think if we craft a policy, if we find in a particular school that there is this behavior of racism, then we just have to find the parents and then deal with the parents, because I believe at home, these parents are teaching their children separate development, and they're teaching their children the superiority of saying, because I am black, I am better than this one. I'm white, I'm better than this one. I think the parents are, there are two elements within the community, within the society, who are still teaching those racism activities that we thought by 1994 will come to us. So if we pass a policy, then immediately we get a school like Christiana, then we don't even make noise about it. We just get those parents and deal with the parents. And if it comes to a push, I would have said they must show the door that South Africa does not allow that type of parents. They must go and get a place where they can stay and continue practice that not in South Africa. South Africa does not allow that, you know. So I think I see it as a policy that will. I mean, how long are we still going to deal with this thing? Particularly, we teach these young people. These young people, if we teach them those, and they are going to come. But if we deal with parents, I think it will take us 3 years, and we shall have completed this.
Yeah. All right. Anton, I'll give you a final word here as we wrap up, how to deal with this situation. Matakane is suggesting let's deal with the parents, because I suppose in the conversation that Rian raises of the tree and the fruit, you would want to deal with the tree more than actually dealing with the fruit. But also teachers who display this behavior, if indeed there are teachers involved, should they be thrown the door? And are these things not going to open up court challenges?
Yeah, it's difficult to deal with it in such a way. We'll have to see what the Human Rights Commission comes up with, the recommendations, and I hope that they do speak to the community as a whole, so that everybody can, submit their own views on why this has happened at Jan Viljoen Hoërskool. I think to say that without evidence that it's the parents and the parents must be chased out of the country is obviously not an answer. That is not constitutional in the first place. And secondly, it's also what Hitler did to the Jews. So I think that type of talk is unacceptable. I think if we go dig deeper, we'll find complex psychological motivations why people believe certain things. And you will also find, interestingly enough, that the children develop belief systems independent from their parents. The parents are not so influential anymore in modern life. Children spend almost more time in school than they spend at home. So to say, yes, it's the parents who's done this, I mean, I need the evidence for that first of all. If the parents are guilty as charged, then of course there must be a way to deal with that. I'm not saying it's not the case. Then there must be a broader approach, a societal approach to once again sensitize people to each other's plights. Because what we have in South Africa are people from different backgrounds, different cultures, races, and other differences, socioeconomic, that are trying to survive with very little at hand to survive with. South Africa is better off than most other African states and some other countries in the world, but still we have a lack of resources. So we need to see how we can use the existing resource base and get people to work together within that environment. Otherwise, if we can't do that, we'll have some form of separation again in the future, which is obviously not healthy. We need to learn respect for each other. And if there are white people out there or black people out there who have very, very negative views of each other, of superiority and all those things that go with it, those need to be addressed. There will always be some person, one or two, who cannot be changed or do not want to be changed, but they will remain the minority. But most people have a sense that they want to get along. But once a polarization takes place, people automatically fall back on their default positions of culture, race, and those type of things. Especially when in an economic environment where things are difficult, people fall back for survival on what they know, and that's also dictated by race and culture.
Advocate Anton, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there because of time, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your intervention. Rian, maybe 30 seconds, just wrapping it up. In your own view, how do we address this?
Yeah, I think we need to start living the preamble of our Constitution, not read it as policy, but read it as a guideline for life. The second thing I want to say is that we need to keep in mind that the school and the schooling sector has been very disrupted over the last 2 years. We're finding reports of the mental health of learners, even parents, but teachers at a very low point. And there might be something in play about that there's frustration, there's angst. Racism has no room in our schools, but it doesn't have room in our societies either. But let's just get the full picture and understand and try and live towards the future rather than live towards the past.
Appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming through, and thank you all for joining us tonight as well online.